With the Chicago Bears picking 10th overall in the NFL draft, you really only need to rank 10 first-round prospects because Ryan Poles is guaranteed to have at least one of them still on the board when the Bears are on the clock.
You are Locked On Bears, your daily Chicago Bears podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Bears, and I'm your host, Lauren Cox. I'm here to bring you your daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. You can follow me on Twitter at CoxSports1. You can read my writing over at Chicago Bears on SI, and you can follow the podcast at Locked On Bears on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and the Locked On Bears YouTube channel, where you can keep up with all of our video podcasts as well. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And on the show today, I want to put together a Chicago Bears NFL Draft big board, ranking the top 10 prospects for the Bears that you just, when you're on the clock, you take the highest player left on your board, and that's going to be your true best player available with that 10th overall pick. And you only need 10 guys on that board. But the board for the Bears is going to be different than the board for a lot of other teams, just depending on what positions you want to add and where you are in the draft and how you view specific prospects. So we'll go through where, the top 3 is super easy. The top 5 is not hard. Gets a little bit more difficult when you try and figure out, okay, where exactly does running back Ashton Jeanty from Boise State fit in that mix versus some of the top offensive tackle prospects. And then if those guys are gone, where do you go to next? What feels like reaching versus trusting your eyes and what you like among these prospects that are available that might differ from where other people think or what the consensus might be from other draft analysts who might be looking at things a little bit differently. And that's kind of where I want to start with this Bears big board, because at the top, I think you have to rank every player in the draft, right? You have to include the full pool of players, knowing that there are a few guys that are just never going to make it anywhere near 10, but you still put them on your big board just in case, in case a trade opportunity opens up where the Patriots want to trade down from 4 or whatever it looks like, and it's a guy who's still on your board, that really high on your board that you want to get, and the opportunity is right. Like you rank players, even including ones that you don't think are going to be there, so then you can cross them off your list, and then when you are on the clock, you know exactly that you're picking from the very best possible options available. And so the first 3 on the Bears big board for us here are the first 3 that are going to be on anyone's big board, I guess, minus the quarterbacks, right? We're not putting any QBs on this Bears big board, and maybe a lot of teams are going to have Miami quarterback Cam Ward is going to be really high on their big boards, or Shedeur Sanders from Colorado. Like, that's not going to be there. But the non-quarterbacks in this draft class, Abdul Carter, the edge rusher from Penn State, could be the number 1 overall pick, could be the number 2 overall pick. He's not making it past 4. You've got Travis Hunter, the cornerback and wide receiver from Colorado, who plays both ways at a very high level. And then Michigan defensive tackle Mason Graham. Those 3 to me are pretty head and shoulders above the rest of the draft class in terms of these are blue chip prospects at the very top of the draft that in almost no way should they ever fall to the Bears. You'd be really surprised if the order of events happened that made them fall to the Chicago Bears. But if they did, you'd have to be pretty quick to turn your card in and be thrilled that you got a top 3, top 5 player in this draft with the 10th overall pick. Those guys are head and shoulders a little bit above everyone else. From here, it opens up a bit more. This is where you'll get people putting maybe Boise State running back Ashton Jeanty in that number 4 spot, as if you see him as a truly, truly special running back, or, Will Campbell, the LSU offensive lineman, if you see him as a blue chip left tackle prospect, that's where he can go here. Some people really like the Arizona wide receiver, Tet McMillan, or even the Penn State tight end, Tyler Warren. Things open up quite a bit after you get through that top 3 of the truly top 5 prospects in this NFL draft. When I start to apply a Chicago Bears lens to this, right, you want to evaluate overall who just the best prospects are, but you also have to take into account a little bit, some amount of positional value and what their value would be to the Bears as a team. Not so much because of need per se, but just getting the most out of a first round pick, right? Putting a linebacker here might not be the best spot for a big board. Even if you really think like Jihad Campbell from Alabama is just, the next Brian Urlacher or whatever. I mean, probably not the case, but you know what I mean? Like it's really tough to put somebody like a linebacker here, like positional value and not need, but I guess value to the Bears is also weighs in here in addition to just how good you think these prospects might be. So for me, after Abdul Carter, after Travis Hunter, after Mason Graham, I go straight to Missouri offensive tackle Armand Membo. I think to me he's the clearest cut left tackle prospect in this draft. I put Will Campbell right after him at 5. I go 4 for Membo and 5 for Will Campbell. And that's where I again hit a little bit of a snag here. But to me Membo is more of a true offensive tackle prospect, someone I really have a lot of faith in becoming a really solid NFL left tackle in the long term. And I think Will Campbell will be a great NFL offensive lineman, but I think if you're drafting Will Campbell where the Bears are at 10, you're putting him at left tackle and competing with Braxton Jones right away, and you hope he can hold up at left tackle, and then if he doesn't hold up at left tackle, you move him inside to guard, and you feel like you've got a 10-year starter at guard. Like worst case scenario, he's going to be a great guard, but you hope he can still be a great tackle. I'm not taking him this early if I'm only going to make him a guard. I have to try him at tackle if I'm going to use the 10th overall pick on him. And so if I have to try him at tackle and I'm not 100% certain he's going to be a great tackle in the NFL, I would rather go with somebody like Membo, who is more of a true offensive tackle and has played mostly right tackle at Mizzou, but I think can move over to left side and be super successful there. If you want to move Darnold right to left tackle, doesn't matter to me. I think he's going to be the best pure offensive tackle prospect in this draft class and someone I believe in the skill set of quite a bit. Not just projecting him to be great, but I still think he's a really, really good player. Maybe not quite as perfectly refined as Will Campbell, but that's why they're neck and neck here at 4 and 5 for me. I do think there's a drop-off between Hunter and Membo, and I think there's not as much of a drop-off if we get past Campbell at 5 here, because I certainly think you see a lot of mock draft possibilities where, okay, the Bears are on the clock, and Campbell is there, and somebody like running back Ashton Jeanty is also there, and you're like, okay, well, which player would I prefer? Well, you got to take the guy who's higher on your big board here, and as I'm laying my big board out here for the Chicago Bears, I have Will Campbell at 5, ahead of Ashton Jeanty. And we'll go through more specifically where we place Jeanty in this, because I also think it's tricky, again, trying to take into consideration how much you like the prospect versus how much value there is in drafting the prospect at that spot versus other players you might be able to get at his position versus other players you might not be able to get at another position where you feel like, man, you maybe need to get that earlier in the draft. And that's where it becomes a very difficult exercise to put this big board together. Because how do you weigh a really good offensive lineman versus a really good running back versus a really good pass rusher? And it's not as simple as like, well, Jeanty can be this special running back, so therefore he's got to be better than all of these guys, because I don't think that's universally the case either. It's also an odds probability of like, what is the likelihood that I think Jeanty is going to be great versus that I think Campbell or Membo is going to be great. And I would rather invest my picks at this point in a Membo or a Campbell, but Jeanty's right here in this conversation as well. So we'll take a look at like where the rest of this big board plays out, because it gets really tricky from here, and we'll kind of compare that to where the consensus is among NFL draft analysts and the players that don't exactly make it into this top 10, despite being right there in this conversation. Next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, America's #1 sportsbook. March Madness is here, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories and even who's cutting down the nets. If you want to follow your bracket picks all the way to the top, you certainly can, with spreads, totals, and game props that make it easy to put your money where your mouth is, or where your pen is, I guess, in terms of your bracket. Or if you want to bet on any of your other favorite sports, you can bet on the NFL draft, Major League Baseball, NBA playoffs are not far away as well. You name it, they've got all the sports in the FanDuel app. It's simple and easy to use. When you win, you get paid instantly. So visit FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoops action all tournament long with America's #1 sportsbook. This big board gets really difficult for me right around this spot. It's like, okay, you've got guys in a couple of different categories here. After we've got Carter, Hunter, and Graham, and Armand Membo, and Will Campbell, then you've got like some different groups here. You've got like the skill position stars. You've got Ashton Jeanty, the top running back in the NFL draft. You've got Tet McMillan from Arizona, sort of the top wide receiver in the NFL draft. You got Tyler Warren, the Penn State tight end, the top tight end, right? You sort of got the weapons are sort of those guys in that category. You've got pass rushers like James Pierce from Tennessee, Michael Williams from Georgia, Shamar Stewart from Texas A&M, Mike Green from Marshall. Like they're in this conversation. You've got other offensive linemen like Kelvin Banks from Texas. He's probably the only one I would put right up here in this category, like immediately there, but there's other offensive line like Josh Simmons from Ohio State is somebody who's been up and around this conversation a little bit here. And then you've got a bunch of the other defensive players like the DBs and linebackers that are all really good players that may end up being top 10 picks when it's all said and done. You know, Michigan cornerback Will Johnson. You've got Georgia safety Malachi Starks. You got Georgia linebacker Jalen Walker, who's like a hybrid edge rusher linebacker. You got Jihad Campbell from Alabama as the linebacker we mentioned earlier. There's Zadie Barron from Texas, is a versatile defensive back option. Like any of these guys, you can have in this conversation as, you know, top 10 caliber players that one team, all it takes is one team to fall in love with and throw them in the top 10. And that's where it becomes a lot harder to sort because there's so much of a variety on these players, and it's not so neatly clear and obvious that these are the best guys and that everyone else is below them because everyone starts to be in similar ranges of this conversation. So one of the things I like to do here as just a little bit of an exercise, because I'm going to deviate from this a little bit, but the host of Locked On Cowboys, Marcus Mosher, assembled a consensus big board where he looks at all the top NFL draft analysts and then puts all their big boards together and figures out like, okay, if everybody's got this guy one, then that puts him like sort of ranks how everyone does it from a consensus big board standpoint. And for him, there's a consensus top 10 and then quite a bit of a drop off after that. But Marcus's consensus big board, which is not really, you know, he assembled it, but it's not his draft thoughts, right? But it's Hunter, Carter, Graham. And then the consensus board has Jeanty at 4, Campbell at 5, Georgia edge rusher / linebacker Jalen Walker at 6, Tyler Warren at 7, Membo at 8, Michigan cornerback Will Johnson at 9, and then Miami quarterback Cam Ward at 10. After them, it gets a little bit more jumbled, but you can already see in some of the average numbers in here, the last 4 guys are kind of jumbled. Really, the last 5 guys, it's like between Jalen Walker, Tyler Warren, Armand Membo, Will Johnson, and Cam Ward, those guys are all really close to each other on these big boards. It's really after you get through the top 5, it spreads out quite a bit more. And then when we try to apply this to the Chicago Bears perspective, right, like Jalen Walker, the Georgia edge rusher, is just not a fit in what the Bears want to do defensively. He's not going to be a defensive end in this Bears scheme. He's an off-ball linebacker who can rush the passer, and he can't play defensive end. So, like, he's not going to be anywhere near this high on a Chicago Bears big board there. He just doesn't fit. Or Cam Ward, the Miami quarterback, is just not going to be anywhere on the Bears big board. Like, you're not drafting Cam Ward anywhere in the first. Bears are not taking a quarterback anywhere in the first 4 to 5 to 6 rounds of this draft. Maybe super late. Could you take a backup quarterback? Sure, but right, that's not going to be Cam Ward. And so there's room then for other players to fit into a Bears big board that fit more what the Bears want and are also really good players that there's going to be individual team preferences here. And that's all sort of a preface to sort of look at where we go next from here, because I think there's going to be a couple of names in my top 10 that are not considered universal top 10 prospects in this draft, but top 10 to the Bears versus top 10 in the overall draft is a little bit of a different angle of how we are looking at it here. And so when I expand out my top 10, right away at 6, after Will Campbell, again, to recap, Abdul Carter, Mason Graham, Travis Hunter, Armand Membo, Will Campbell, 1 through 5. I go James Pierce, the defensive end edge rusher from Tennessee. I'm a lot higher on James Pierce, I think, than a lot of other draft analysts, but I think he is an all-around stud at the position, someone who I think is very clearly, in my eyes, the next best edge rusher in this draft class. You'd be surprised how similar he and Abdul Carter affected the quarterback this past season in terms of how often they were disruptive in getting into the backfield here. He is a top flight pass rusher, head and shoulders above the rest of the defensive end class after him. It's Carter, it's Pierce, and then there's a gap for me in that regard. Pierce is a little bit lighter than what Dennis Allen tends to prefer at defensive end. I think he's got room to add more strength, and he can still get better as a player, but like, this is a guy who I think can be a 10-sack guy, and I will absolutely take that every time with a top 10 pick, with the 10th overall pick in the draft. I think size he's not small, right? He's small for Dennis Allen. Dennis Allen likes really big defensive ends, but he's not like, this is not Leonard Floyd thin where you're like, ooh, can he hold up on the edge in the NFL? Like, and obviously Floyd could. Like, this is not that kind of thin. It's just a little bit smaller than what Dennis Allen prefers. I know there were concerns about off-field or character red flags popping up around James Pierce. I certainly cannot speak with a lot of authority on that, but I have talked to people, and at the NFL Combine, that was one of the conversations around. It's like, what is everyone hearing about James Pierce? And there's not much there that has come out. Whereas like Mike Green, the edge rusher from Marshall, we'll talk about in a second, like there's a lot more there that's real. And well, that's actually, or at least like reported and legitimately not just a rumor, but like, no, there was actual things reported there. But Pierce, maybe some immaturity question marks there, maybe some, that's probably the best way to put it is immaturity question marks there. But like, sign me up for a great pass rusher. We'll make it work with the locker room that we have. Then I jumped to Jeanty at 7. And this is where I got the most torn, right? Okay, if I'm there and Campbell and Membo are gone and I'm on the clock, do I take the pass rusher or do I take the running back? And this is a kind of a coin flip decision for me because I think Jeanty is really good, but I went with the value of the pass rusher that I think is really good versus the running back that I also think is really good. But I really like the running backs I can get in the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th round in this draft. I don't like as much the pass rushers I can get in the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th round in this draft. And so if the players are close, I'll go with the position value there of Pierce slightly over Jeanty. Those 7, pretty easy for me. After those 7, that's when I really, really struggled. Like, after Jeanty at 7, if Jeanty and Pierce and Campbell and Membo and Hunter and Graham and Carter are all gone, I don't like my options very much there. It's guys I would prefer to take if I could trade down. I put Mike Green from Marshall there because I think he's also a better pass rusher than Michael Williams of Georgia or Shamar Stewart from Texas A&M. Like, doesn't have the same size as those guys either, a little smaller like James Pierce, but like, give me the better pass rusher, even if he doesn't fit, the sort of arbitrary size preferences of Dennis Allen. Like, give me the better football player, even if the size doesn't match what he typically likes there. So I went pass rusher there, and then I'll throw in Kelvin Banks, the offensive tackle from Texas, who I think can be a good NFL left tackle, but if he's not, can be a good NFL guard, kind of like just a lesser version of Campbell. So I threw him here as another guy I'd be happy with in the first round. 10 would feel a little early, but I wouldn't feel like I'm reaching. I feel like I'm getting a left tackle upgrade, and that's something that could go a long way for the Bears. And then at number 10 for me, I throw in a little bit of a wild card here, but a player I really like that doesn't fit conventionally what you think the Bears should do at 10, but Jahdae Barron from Texas, the defensive back. Why I like Barron here is specific to the fit on the Bears. Like, Will Johnson, the Michigan corner, might be an overall better cornerback specifically, but Jahdae Barron can play outside cornerback, can play slot, can play strong safety, and can play free safety. He did all of it at Texas. And I'm excited by the idea of drafting someone like Jahdae Barron and not saying, well, we'll figure it out later, but knowing that you've got options so that, year one, Jahdae Barron could start at outside cornerback opposite Jalen Johnson and move Tyreek Stevenson to the bench and let Stevenson develop for another year. And then next year, if you don't re-sign Kyler Gordon, Jahdae Barron could play the slot and Stevenson could start on the outside and you let Kyler Gordon walk. I don't think they should. I think they should re-sign Kyler Gordon, but you never know what happens in the NFL. Barron could move into the slot. Or if you don't re-sign Jaquan Brisker, you could move Barron to safety. Or if you end up cutting, or you don't re-sign, why am I spacing on the other safety's name? The veteran from the Tennessee Titans. Oh my gosh, find it right now. Kevin Byard. If Kevin Byard moves on after next year and you keep Jaquan Brisker, you could move Barron to safety. Like, this is a do-it-all defensive back who I have a lot of confidence in playing any of those positions at a high level and being able to handle that transition because he's so smart and instinctive and just has a feel for defensive football that I think he can do a little bit of anything and everything on this back end. And if my offensive linemen are all gone and my pass rushers are all gone and my running back is gone, okay, fine. Twist my arm. I'll take the do-it-all defensive back who makes this back end of my defense better and can bolster that group even more. It's about taking best player available. And I think he could be a really great player for this Bears defense on the back end. A controversial bottom of this top 10. I'm certain of it. I think feel much more strongly about the top 7 than I do the last 3, Green, Banks, and Barron, and I would be open to other players in that mix. And I want to talk about some of the players that are not in the mix there, including Arizona wide receiver Ted McMillan, Penn State tight end Tyler Warren, and some of the other defensive players that I think you could, and some of the other pass rushers as well that I think you could make some strong arguments for here on a Chicago Bears big board. Next on Locked On Bears. Ten is obviously a little bit of an arbitrary cutoff here because the Bears pick at 10, but like just because someone isn't in the top 10 here doesn't mean they're not 11 or 12 and right here in the same conversation as some of these other guys I'm putting at the bottom of my Chicago Bears big board, right? Like I put Mike Green and Kelvin Banks and Jahdae Barron there ahead of everyone else, but doesn't mean that everyone else isn't right there in the mix and couldn't easily make an argument for a lot of other players to be in this conversation. I want to start with the other pass rushers here because I put James Pierce and Mike Green in my top 10 and not Mykel Williams from Georgia or Shamar Stewart from Texas A&M. I like Shamar Stewart more than Mykel Williams, but both guys to me are limited in terms of what they've been able to do as a productive player in college football. And it's not just he only played 1 year, so he couldn't produce that much. But when you have like multiple seasons consecutively of not necessarily taking that step forward as a pass rusher, that gives me a lot of pause, despite Shamar Stewart being such a freak athlete and someone who is, maybe the most physically gifted pass rusher in this draft class in terms of height, weight, speed, arm length. Like he's physically everything Dennis Allen would want as a defensive end, but on the field, it doesn't quite match up. And to me, it's in particular because we're talking about Mykel Williams is at Georgia and Shamar Stewart is at Texas A&M, right? It's one thing if you say, okay, well, Mike Green was at Marshall and was at Virginia for that. Like, so maybe in the NFL, he's going to get some better coaching and can still be even better in the future than what he's been right now. And of course, all these players have the potential to get better and still improve, but like, I don't exactly think someone like Mykel Williams is going to leave Georgia, come to the NFL, and then unlock a lot more as a pass rusher that he wasn't able to do at Georgia. Like we think of Georgia as already like a minor league NFL program here, right? Like we've seen these Georgia defensive linemen be super productive in college and then come into the NFL and be super productive. Most of them for the Philadelphia Eagles, it seems like. But Mykel Williams, he's only 20, about to turn 21. Like he's still young, but he's played college football for 3 years, like a lot of snaps for 3 years. It wasn't like he sat on the bench for a couple seasons and only came on late. And he's got a really low pass rush win rate compared to where you would want it for NFL players coming out of college. And you don't see a lot of history of guys increasing their ability to consistently get after the quarterback, jumping over to the NFL. His production profile aligns with the types of players that haven't worked super well translating from the NFL, from college to the NFL. I think he's got a high floor. He's very good against the run. He's not a bad prospect at all. Like he's a good football player. But if I'm taking a defensive end edge rusher in the top 10, I want this guy to be a difference-making pass rusher. That should be where he makes his real money there. And I'm just not seeing that with Mykel Williams. Shamar Stewart has been a little bit better than that, and I prefer Stewart over Mykel Williams in terms of the pass rushing ability there. And I think he too has more to tap into from if you clean up the technique, can he become a better pass rusher? And I think some things scheme-wise at Texas A&M weren't always putting him in the position to prioritize sacks and pressures in some of the same ways. But I still would much rather have the player who I've seen do it at a high level consistently in college, like James Pierce, who's done it for multiple seasons. Then I still have questions as to why Stewart plays a bunch of snaps 3 years in a row and never gets, it's not the sack numbers for me. I don't care. Sacks versus hits versus hurries, whatever. It's the overall pressure rate and pass rush win rate that just hasn't been where it needs to be for Shamar Stewart compared to these other pass rushers, Pierce and Mike Green ahead of them on my Bears big board. It's not like I would be super upset or disappointed or it's the end of the world if the Bears took Williams or Stewart. I just don't think the 10th overall pick is where those players are most worth it for the Chicago Bears. The other guys notably missing from this top 10 are the wide receiver, McMillan from Arizona, and the tight end, Warren from Penn State. We talked a lot about the tight end on yesterday's podcast. He was the harder one to leave off of this list for me. I do think Tyler Warren is going to be a good tight end in the NFL. I just don't know that the 10th overall pick is worth it for the Bears in that spot for someone who's going to be a number 2 for at least the first handful of seasons of his career. And what do you do with Cole Kmet in the long run? There's opportunity for a number 2 tight end. And we talked about that on yesterday's podcast, but it's limited. And there's a lot more opportunity for a number 3 wide receiver like Tet McMillan. But I don't love Tet McMillan's ability to separate. He's got the height, weight, speed. He makes plays after the catch. He makes tough catches, but one-on-one man coverage, I want to see him separate more in ways that are going to translate to the NFL. And I have my doubts, not in terms of I think he's going to be a bad player, but if I'm doing the luxury of taking a wide receiver with the 10th overall pick that the Bears don't need, but you could find a role for him, I really better be darn sure that player is going to be special. That's where it's easier to take Ashton Jeanty because you can really see how special Ashton Jeanty can be. McMillan, I have enough question marks or concerns or doubts about or whatever it's going to look like that 10 for the Bears, it's not for me. If you really needed a wide receiver, right, that's a slightly different conversation, but it's just not quite there for me either. And so I'm getting more out of pass rushers, out of offensive tackles, or even somebody like Jahdae Barron from Texas, who I think can always have a role in my defense every season, than these guys who I like, but again, we're splitting hairs and nitpicking a little bit between a really good tight end, a really good wide receiver, really good offensive tackle, a really good DB. Tyler Warren might be 11 on my top 10 list here, and Tet McMillan might be 12 on my top 10 list. I don't know about ranking them specifically in what order, but they're right there in that conversation with those guys. And then guys like Will Johnson from Michigan or Malachi Starks from Georgia, cornerback and a safety. I think they're really good football players. And if the Bears had more opportunity for them, they might be higher up in that conversation, but getting value out of these players and being able to have a role for them right away as a rookie, as a top 10 pick is important here, in addition to making sure they're the best player over the next 5 to 10 years. And I just feel like the upgrade that I get from pass rushers and offensive linemen have a bigger impact on the Chicago Bears roster than taking a safety in the first round and kind of sitting him on the bench for a year or waiting for there to be injuries or creating a package to rotate him in on. Sometimes it just doesn't work out super well. And even at corner, okay, I'm drafting an outside corner and then I'm just sort of sitting Tyreek Stevenson for the next few years and giving up on a second round pick. It doesn't feel like the best use of my resources to use a first round pick at that position where you still got a guy on a rookie contract who still has a lot of upside who could be a really good fit in my rosters, right? It's more than just who is purely the most talented player, no questions asked, right? It's about scheme fit, and it's about preferences, and it's about value to the roster, not just quote unquote needs, but value to how the Bears can get the most out of these players and the most out of these picks. And that's what makes putting together these big boards super, super tough. Again, if you want to disagree with some of these players, by all means, there's a lot of personal preference and personal opinion in how we rank these guys. I'm pretty firm on the top 3, a little less firm, but still pretty firm on the top 5. I'm willing to hear you out on Ashton Jeanty being a little bit higher in there, but after about 5, it becomes anybody's ball game and anybody's guess on who's going to be there, which lends itself to the idea of hey, if there are a bunch of guys you view similarly, trading down sure seems like it would be a really nice option because you could still get a bunch of these guys later on in the draft. It's going to be hard to trade down though because every team may end up viewing these players similarly, so why would they need to trade up for one? I do want to go through what trade down scenarios might look like for the Bears and how that might be difficult this time around, coming up here on the Locked On Bears podcast. So make sure you hit that subscribe button on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts, because that's going to be the best way to keep up with all of our daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. If you're looking for a second listen, you can always find more draft talk over at Locked On NFL Draft with Damian Parson and Keith Sanchez. The latest draft rankings, news, and analysis every single day on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Just make sure you come on back for another episode of Locked On Bears tomorrow and another opportunity for you to bear down.